Do we just hold the cards normally? We don't have to go like this. Oh, that was my first voice crack here.
Guys, I'm so sorry. Which camera am I looking at?
Hey guys, we're here for Baha'i Vlogs deck of questions. Hey guys. Wait, sorry. Hey guys, we're here for Baha'i Vlogs deck of questions.
Hi, I'm Jada. I serve with youth in Mt Druitt and I've been serving for about 4 years now.
And my name's Kassra and I've been animating a JY group in Manningham and Melbourne for the last 2 years. What's a common assumption about teens that you think is wrong?
That they're lazy. I feel like youth or like teenagers, they have so much energy to do things. Like from the point of society, we see that like they always speak about them being on their phones or having gadgets, always being at home, etc. But I think like even through the writings or even if you observe them in the real world, like seeing that they actually have so much energy and so much vigor to do things. They're so eager to be a part of things. Like, yeah, I also just think about like the sense of community that they want to feel.
I think teens, and also this can also be applied to children, is that they don't know things. We are inexperienced. Teens, children are very inexperienced. It's part of their nature. Of course, at the end of the day, especially with children and younger teens, I think the parents' judgment should come over their judgment and their guidance should come, but you have to hear them out. You have to have them the open-mindedness that maybe what they're saying is right, or maybe I can learn something from my child, or I can learn something from this teenager. Because yeah, their environment is different to when I was a kid. They're gonna know things that I don't. I'm gonna know things they don't. So yeah, I think that's definitely it, 100%.
Yeah, this common misconception that like in this stage of life, they want to party, they want to go and play sport. They basically just thinking that they're unable to really think critically. And it really connects to this idea that, yeah, society believes that they don't know anything. When in reality, we know that they're so intelligent and they have so much potential to do things.
And if that was something that was more known and more agreed upon as a society, I think young people and old people's crazy. Young people and the older generation would spend more time actually working together in unison and working off each other's strengths rather than young people trying to always prove themselves and have this chip on their shoulder, like trying to prove themselves to older people, and older people trying to prove that they know more than young people. So if we just accepted that, oh no, young people know some things, and young people say that, okay, this person's 30 years more experienced than me, you can't teach experience, they're gonna know things better than I do, and we accepted those two things, I think it would be crazy.
Yeah.
Like, that duo, those two generations coming together.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Abdul-Baha also speaks of that, right? Like he says that like the younger generation should learn from the experience of the older ones, and that the older generation should see that the younger ones will soon lead. Do you think young people today have a tougher time than in the past?
Nothing is really black and white. So of course there are certain things that may be tougher for us compared to maybe our parents' generation or our parents' time, but then there's a lot of conveniences that we also have that our parents didn't have. So I think it really depends on what kind of problem we're looking at, because at the end of the day, I personally believe that everything is relative. So we're relative to our situation, we're always going to find an issue, always going to find a struggle. And I think if our parents were young now and they had the same access to social media, to technology, to all this very stimulating parts of our environment, I think they would have the same struggles. And then if we were in their generation, so I think it just depends. And I think it's nuanced. We all have our struggles based on our environment.
In our neighborhood, we were able to go through book 4 with a lot of the youth, and they were really able to see like the struggles and the challenges that the previous heroes of the faith really went through. And it's really funny because then they started comparing it to themselves. Like they were like, oh, well, we're not getting martyred in this day, or we're not sacrificing much in this day. But it was so nice to see like how they also like they were able to connect both of like their services, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
And so Yeah, I guess with this question, we know that like a challenge is still a challenge, regardless of how hard it is. And although it is like very different times from us to our parents to those before them, etc.
Have you ever found working with youth so hard that you thought about stopping?
Oh wow. Yes. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think now though, like I can't believe I ever had that thought, if that makes sense. I think like obviously in book 7 it speaks about transitory and permanent motivation and how it's not that we are here specifically for the fun. We're here to serve Baha'u'llah and God, and that's it. And then I think when I serve with many of the youth in my neighborhood, I think about like the amount of potential they really have and how I know that I'm just an instrument trying to accompany them, trying to be their friend, etc.
100%. Yeah, no, very similar answer to yourself. I think, of course, naturally, we all have moments where we don't want to continue. It becomes too inconvenient, it becomes very challenging, and at the end of the day, we're serving. So a lot of times we're not, quote unquote, getting anything out of it materially. But I think the point you mentioned on the potential of those youth is what overwhelms that thought, because I think that's a very, very privileged and special position to be in, where you can potentially be the only chance that that young person has to having that certain direction in their life for the rest of their life. So when it gets hard, it's just thinking about that and thinking, okay, you have the opportunity to make a real difference in this young person's life. And I think that completely overwhelms any struggles or any doubts.
Exactly.
So, yeah. How can fun help empower young people to take action?
When I think about this question, I think a lot about the arts. For example, in Mt Druitt, we were able to have this like arts showcase that really like showcased a lot of like the youth's talents and how they also have so much potential to really put like the word of God into art, especially. And like the reality of our neighborhood is that not many of them like studying. So then obviously looking at that reality, how are other ways that we can really make, like learning fun and how we can really try to engage them all. How do you handle conflict and disunity among teens and youth?
I think always being able to understand what the issue is first. So really giving the chance to hear out that person without having the judgment before that prejudice. It's very hard because anything in your environment, maybe something a friend tells you or the way that you saw it happen completely influences the way that you're hearing out that person. So I think I just try my best to go in there with no preconceived notion and just really trying to hear out the person. And I think once the situation's understood and you're going in there trying to understand, from then on, I think there is a better chance of that conflict being solved. It's never a guarantee, because at the end of the day, they're two people of their own as well. So you can't control that person. You can do your best to influence it in the best way possible. But yeah, I think starting off there is a good start point. Yeah. I really want to know what you think on this. Yeah.
The one thing that came to mind was probably like the importance of consultation. And so obviously, because we do have a lot of youth in our neighborhood, there's a lot of conflict.
Of course.
Yeah, they like, and we're so blessed to also have so many families in our community that really encourage them to consult together. And so I know like there's this one saying that we always use. It's about like how someone's supposed to know what you're thinking. Like basically that like no one can really read another person's thoughts. And so yeah, I remember one of the youth, they came and they were saying like they were struggling really bad with another youth. And we didn't actually have to say you should go and consult. Like they were able to go and take that friend aside and be like, hey, I really like think this and that.
How do you involve parents and families in supporting their young people?
I know a conversation that usually happens with parents and families is one about our neighborhood's reality specifically. So like, obviously there's a lot of gang violence within our community. And I think that's one aspect that the families really try to keep their their children from. And so when we're able to have like these conversations about the reality of our neighborhood and how we're able to really contribute to it, it then starts to bring in these different ideas of education and how education can also assist these young youth. And so, the way we've been able to engage parents and families is purely from like home visits and being able to really build connections with these parents. And then we've also had a lot of neighborhood feasts, a lot of showcases where they can also come and see what their children have been doing and so on.
Yeah, I think my answer is definitely a bit shorter. I think how I do it generally is just through, I think, firstly, showing up myself. So I think something that gains respect of parents, and not even respect, not that we're looking for their respect, kind of, that's not the intention, but something that builds that trust with the parent is that consistency, showing up, even if it's messaging the group chat every week, same thing, following up with the children and how they're going. And when you do that, the parents see that, oh, this person's really putting effort into this, and it makes them more inclined to do so as well.
How do you respond to the sense of hopelessness some young people feel today?
My personal opinion is that a lot of it comes from technology and specifically social media. The reason being, we spoke about nuance before and applying nuance and how important it is to not look at things black and white. I think social media, a lot of the times, is black and white. It's this side or that side. It's you believe this or you believe that. If you don't believe this, you're this kind of person. And because of that, it gives this perception of the world as this very hostile place where if you don't think a certain way, if you don't agree to a certain thing, you are either banished, you're isolated, you're banished from this group of people, and you're isolated from society. And it's this very catastrophic thinking with, again, I love using that word, zero nuance involved. And I think that urging younger people to really not put the phone down, like I think that's unrealistic. It's part of our lives. It's going to be around. We have to learn to, I think, coexist with it in a healthy way and encourage that, okay, get out there, actually talk to people. Actually talk to people, whether it's through activities, just general conversation, whether you're going to class, talk to more people, more of your peers.
You know, I feel like when youth have this sense of hopelessness, it's purely obviously because they feel like they don't have a sense of hope. And so I think being able to think about the things that do give youth hope or do give young teens hope are obviously things that give us purpose. And so I know that in our neighborhood, the sense of purpose obviously is derived from a twofold moral purpose. It's from being able to develop your intellectual and spiritual side, as well as contributing to the community. And like you were saying about getting outside and getting off your phones, for example, I know that like these ways, like even through service projects, like really lift someone's spirit. That could also be through the arts and through music. I know that many people feel this sense of hope when there's a devotional, when there's singing, when there's laughter, when there's joy, especially when there's like this sense of community. And so like one thing in our neighborhood is that we've been having many more neighborhood gatherings with many of the families around, being able to speak about how we can fix this, like this sense of hopelessness that the youth are feeling. Yeah.
Because what you said made me think of one thing, and that is that this sense of hopelessness, I think, also causes a lot of young people to perceive that if they try and do anything good, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I think that this mindset is not it's not a helpful mindset in any form. The reason being that, well, yeah, if everyone thinks that, then of course it's not going to make any difference. But if you just have that mindset, like, okay, I'm just going to do what I can, and firstly, you'll get that purpose that you were saying. You will build that sense of purpose in yourself, and you'll actually feel much better, and you'll feel more hopeful. But also, you could influence other people to do the same thing, because sometimes all it takes for someone is just to see someone else do it.
Exactly.
Just to see someone else do it. And then, as you mentioned, builds that community. And when you're doing it with other people, you just want to keep doing it and keep building and building and building. So 100%. That's just what you said reminded me of that. So I think, yeah. What do you think society is missing when it comes to supporting youth?
I think we already know that society has a different interpretation of what youth are. And so we know that society thinks of them as troublesome. We know they think of them as, you know, like youth or people that don't actually care. And I think that's exactly what they're missing. They're really missing this like spiritual perception of being able to understand youth at a certain level, being able to understand that they have so much potential and so much capacity.
I think it just comes down to the main thing that's missing is trust. And don't get me wrong, like I'm going to be fair to our parents, our obviously older generation. Of course, like you can't fully put everything into youth because they're inexperienced and their minds are changing every day, especially nowadays. And of course, you have to be there to put your foot down sometimes and have some control. However, I think in a lot of spaces, there needs to be more trust towards youth. In general society, not that there isn't this opportunity and it's not like there isn't these activities or initiatives going on, but I think there is a lot more of that needed where we need to give responsibility to younger people, of course with guidance and oversight, but there is a need for responsibility to be passed on, real responsibility, to the point where a young person's like, okay, I got to really do something here, because on a lower level, even in my junior youth group, if I see, or in a class, a deepening, I see a younger person that's not engaged, just give them some responsibility and see how they respond. They're kind of forced to be engaged, and then naturally they may become engaged after that. So yeah, I think that's what I think on an institutional level.
Yeah, it makes me think about like these other institutions within our neighborhood and how there's this like common misconception that youth only like to do fun things. And so a lot of these institutions or like community halls are set up in a way where they're only playing games or they're only playing sports. And it just made me think about the schooling system and about education also, and how that's also not set up in a way where the youth are able to really create this sense of community amongst themselves. And so I was really thinking about how these institutions are really developing this ability to create unity amongst each other. And so we know that like in school, they're constantly competing, constantly trying to get high marks, for example. But we also know that their powers multiply when it's done together. What advice would you give someone starting a youth group?
Yeah, it's really important at the beginning to really take it seriously. And I know that's a very broad way. Like, what does that mean, taking it seriously? Almost like you're treating it like you're a teacher in a school class. Like, teachers have to take their class seriously. They're getting paid to do a job, and of course they treat it with that generally. And I think, of course, we don't think of ourselves as teachers, but then the thing is, we need to treat it with that same discipline, especially when we have people coming from different realities who have never heard of a youth group or a junior youth program. They don't know what that is, and it's their first ever exposure, and as we mentioned before, maybe their last ever exposure to something like this. So we have a very little window of time where we're going to accompany these young people and their families through this process.
And I think like one advice I would actually give is understanding that everyone walks a path of service very differently. Some walk, some jog, some take steps, and sometimes you also have to stop and help the other person. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, I think like, it's very similar with your journey also. Like at the very beginning, I'd say that the accompaniment really had to be strong. And it's all in the group's identity with each other, their friendships with each other, the tutor's friendship with the participant. And so, this other idea of accompaniment and how strong it actually has to be is pretty insane. Like the amount of home visits you would also have to do to really connect with their families and their parents, their siblings. Also like going to all of their little extracurricular activities, like their graduations and all these other things. Yeah, I'd say just remember that everybody is walking a path of service very differently, and that regardless, everybody is also doing it together and walking this path together.
Was there a moment in your teen years that inspired you to work with youth?
When I had graduated high school, I had the bounty of doing book 7. And right after doing book 7, I was chucked into this group to help tutor. And I think that changed my life forever. I think when I was able to go and accompany and also assist these youth to do book 1, I myself, and I think Abdul Baha speaks about this, about how the tutor actually gains much more knowledge than the participant. And yeah, when I was able to do book 1 and really understand like some of the youth and where they were at in their life, which was where I was at in my life, we had like so many questions about what we were going to do. Yeah, it kind of just, I think it solidified my identity like much more also. How do you support a teen who dislikes school and feels unsure about their future?
Oh man, this is such an important question. It's insane. Okay, so school. I'm gonna get out of the way and say that I was not a perfect student, and I did dislike school throughout the entirety of high school. I did not enjoy high school, but I am such a believer in treating formal education seriously, despite me not doing it myself in my high school years. Because, as you mentioned before, the education system is not perfect. The formal education system is not perfect by any means. But that does not mean that we have to opt out and not try, because there are so many hidden benefits that come from doing well at school or treating school seriously. In a faith, we always talk about the importance of education. It is fundamental. And obviously, that doesn't always mean formal. There's many different forms of education we look at. However, I think it's, as you mentioned, like through these activities, through our conversations with the young ones, the junior youth, being able to actually make the goal to be educated, be knowledgeable, and how that can improve every aspect of their life. So this thing you said, like they were to drop out and go work, it's like, that's okay. You can go work, but what makes you think that being a more educated person won't make your work easier? Or even if you are a carpenter or you're a builder, you're a bricklayer, it doesn't matter what you do. Like if you're educated, it's going to be a lot easier to navigate through that work, even though it's very physical. At the end of the day, we all have to read documents. We all have to file our taxes. We all have to do these things we don't like doing, and it can really make our lives easier. And yeah, as you mentioned, providing that opportunity for our young ones to understand that, I think is imperative.
I think in Mt Druitt, it's a much different reality in terms of education. Like, if anything, a lot of the youth are really encouraged to just drop out of school, or they're really encouraged to just go and work. And so this idea of trying to make school enjoyable has been something in our mind a lot. Yeah, so for example, like a lot of the youth, they attend a lot of their book study, JY texts, etc. And a lot of them really love their spiritual education. But when it came to this idea of exploring our material education, all of them were like, oh, they like really didn't want to do it. Like we had tried to do like habits of an orderly mind, for example. They're just like, no, I'm not a math person. I'm not a science person. I'm not this. But it was also really nice to see how over the course of doing those junior youth texts, they were able to also say like, I am a math person or I am a science person. And so I think the support obviously comes from our friendships with them, us being able to really navigate them through this, like through the choice of basically choosing like this skill or occupation. But basically what I'm trying to say is that it's through our friendships as well as the writings, the junior youth texts, and through like the Ruhi Institute, they're really able to bring to light like how material education can really assist them in their lives.
How have you seen the arts help young people explore deep ideas?
It's like what I had mentioned previously. We had a arts showcase night at in our neighborhood, and it was showcasing like all the youth's talents. And this was also a question about how we can really showcase the word of God through these specific talents. Also, we also like were able to do a lot of artsy sessions within our camp. So we have them every day. And so we choose an art piece, either it's drama or music or poetry, etc., or even film. And we then are able to use a quote from the writings and really try to portray it through that specific art. We've been able to really post a few of them online and really showcase how they want to portray that specific quote.
I think the arts are a very, very useful tool because especially younger people these days, the reality is, I mean, I say younger people, but I think everyone, including adults, our attention spans are quite, if you have a phone and you have social media, your attention span's getting messed with, those reels and shorts and everything. But then because of that, I think the arts are a way where, maybe a 14-year-old, 15-year-old is not going to be able to comprehend this deep topic through reading as well as if you did a play or if you did a painting. Because, of course, colors, visuals, sound, and you're getting all these other things involved, I think that aids in your understanding.
What's a simple social action project you found works well with teens? A lot of social action projects really stem from like the youth's talents and like how they're able to use their talents for the betterment of like our neighborhood. And so I know, so obviously like the showcase is one. And so a lot of them were able to showcase their talents there. I know in Griffith, they had done like a social action for like self-defense classes almost. There was also another service project about like they really just saw that like the kids in the neighborhood really struggled to read. And so obviously they were a bit younger, like around 6, 7 years old. And so they were able to implement tutoring like every week for those like younger than them. So it's really sweet to also see how they can really read reality and observe like their surroundings and then also use their talents to then create a service project that really allows them to,
What's your take on social media's influence on young people? Is it good, bad, or overhyped? It can be good, it can be bad. But when we're looking at the reality of social media for younger people, I can comfortably say that it's more bad. And that's because younger people by nature are much more impressionable. And unfortunately, there are many of these, as you mentioned, influencers, streamers who their content preys on these impressionable young people. And because the young people are not experienced and they don't maybe know any better and they're easily moldable, they're gonna go to the more flashy thing. They're gonna go to the thing that gives them that spark of dopamine more. Yeah, I think it's quite dangerous, but we need to do our best to contribute in a positive way in social media, because at the end of the day, there's going to be, if it's just the JY in our community who may follow us on Instagram or whatever, that's a form of action. How we post online, how we present ourselves online is something that they will take note of.
Yeah, I was also thinking about the way like social media portrays youth, especially in Mt Druitt. Like, I don't know, like, I think also thinking about like the music scene within Mt Druitt, for example, yeah, it's also like portrayed as bad. No, like I don't know, also overhyped, also good, but yeah, and also just how like social media portrays just the way youth are in Mount Druitt, I think is portrayed as bad. But then it's like you said, like realizing that there are so many youth in Mount Druitt who also just have so much light and so much, like it's so different from the way social media portrays them. And in terms of music, obviously there's many different music in Mount Druitt also, but yeah.
Okay, what are some of the tough questions young people wrestle with?
I think like this new like cohort of youth that has entered in our neighborhood, they're really starting to think about like ways that they could work that then also contributes to our community. So a lot of them are thinking about teaching, a lot of them are thinking about economics, so on. Yeah, and I think this question of like how they want, like what they want to do for work, what they want to do in terms of service is always crossing their mind.
Very similar to you. I think identity is a huge one. Who am I? What am I here for? What do I want to do in the future?
Yeah.
And honestly, also, what is Jack and Max going to think of me tomorrow when I wear this? Or what can I do to impress my crush? Like these, it could also be things not that deep because they're teenagers. So, but I think there's a mix.
Yeah.
There's a mix, and I think it's important to note that, of course, they're teenagers, so there's a lot of trivial things, but at the same time, they do also think about these bigger questions. They may not openly talk about it, but I remember when I was 15, I was thinking about that stuff. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
What's something you've learnt from a youth that has stayed with you? I remember we had like this new cohort of youth that entered to do book 1. And right after book 1, they were all going back to school and so on. And I think in this time, I was still really unsure of how to share like the word of God with people. Basically, I was just unable to really articulate to others like what exactly I was doing, how I was tutoring, how I was serving. And I remember one of the youth had gone through book 1 and they went to school. And then they had come back. And one of like the parents that worked at the school had came back to us and told us like, hey, by the way, this youth had stormed into the classroom, stood on the table and said, "Allow pa, I'm going to share the Baha'i faith with you all." And so he's sharing the word of God, like so happily, like everyone is listening. Of course, when the teacher told him to get down, he got down. But I was just thinking about like this like level of like, I don't know, not only confidence, but like he also had no shame. He had no like, I guess like the things that he had learned in book 1, like the amount of love he had for his friends to go and share it with them also. Yeah, I think it just taught me that like, yeah, I also just need to get out of my comfortable zone. I need to go and speak to others.
You
like,
care too much.
Yeah, exactly. And if I truly loved others as much as that youth also loved others, then I would go and share.
And that's the deck of questions!
Woo!